You awaken to the sound of hoofbeats clattering against the cobblestone road. The bells from the nearby abbey toll the hour, a slow and somber rhythm echoing through the cold stone walls of a town not quite awake. It's the year 1357, and you're about to spend a day in the company of a figure who walks the fine, bloodied line between healer and butcher, the barber surgeon. He's not a physician, oh no, those lofty men belong to the guilds and universities, often far removed from the dirt and stink of actual human suffering. The barber surgeon, by contrast, is very much of the people. His shop is nestled between a fishmonger and a tanner, its door marked not by a medical sign, but by a familiar red and white pole, a symbol not just of a shave, but of the blood-soaked bandages that once fluttered in the breeze to advertise his dual trades, grooming and surgery. The day begins, predictably, with bloodletting. It's not a gruesome emergency that brings the first patient, but a prosperous-looking merchant in his mid-50s who arrives like clockwork for his monthly balancing of the humors. In medieval medical theory, the body is governed by four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health, it is believed, comes from balance. Illness is imbalance. And excess blood? That, the barber surgeon insists, must be drained. You watch as he wraps a tourniquet just above the elbow, feeling for the vein not with precision instruments but with calloused fingers. His razor is sharp, he sharpens it daily on a leather strop, and with a swift flick, a red stream begins to trickle into a small wooden bowl. There are no gloves. No antiseptic. Only instinct, tradition, and superstition. The merchant doesn't flinch. He's done this dozens of times. There's a quiet sigh, a shared belief that this will prevent fevers, melancholy, or perhaps bad dreams. As the blood flows, the barber surgeon talks about the weather, about the scarcity of leeches this season, and about a strange new malady reported in the next village, boils and sudden death. The Black Death may have passed, but its ghost still lingers. Laid out on a wooden table in the back of the shop is the surgeon's kit. It's a canvas roll, stained with years of use, and when unfurled, it reveals tools both rudimentary and intimidating. A bone saw, used for amputations. A trepanning drill, for boring holes into skulls to relieve pressure or release spirits. Cautery irons, metal rods heated until red-hot, used to sear wounds shut. Forceps, needles, curved hooks, and yes, leeches, kept cool in a clay jar beside a block of cheese. No licenses. No formal training beyond what he learned as an apprentice. The barber surgeon operates by experience and reputation. He may shave a nobleman in the morning and amputate a beggar's leg in the afternoon. Today, he sterilizes his tools, not with boiling water, but by wiping them on a cloth dipped in vinegar or, occasionally, wine. The notion of invisible pathogens is centuries away. Instead, disease is a matter of miasmas, of bad air and bad luck. Mid-morning brings a flurry of desperate cases. A farmer with a toothache pleads for relief. The barber surgeon doesn't hesitate. He selects his tooth key, an instrument that resembles a corkscrew mated with a wrench, and after a few moments of wrenching and muffled screams, the offending molar is out. There's no anesthetic. Just grit and groans. Next comes a young woman with a lump under her arm. The surgeon inspects it silently, prodding with a gloved thumb, not for sterility, but to avoid getting pus on his skin. He suspects a tumor of excess heat. His solution? A poultice made from crushed herbs and lard, and perhaps a bloodletting the following morning. Occasionally, trepanning is required. A boy who fell from a cart and hasn't been able to speak since is brought in. The surgeon traces his fingers across the child's scalp, muttering. He believes a demon has become trapped in the skull, or perhaps it is pressure from bad blood. With no formal diagnosis, he marks the spot and prepares his drill. You don't stay to watch. There are no textbooks. The barber surgeon learns by doing, or by watching others do. Apprentices are common, and they begin young. They start with sharpening razors, holding bowls, cleaning bandages. Eventually, they progress to stitching wounds, removing boils, and yes, sometimes even amputation. It is a grisly education, but one that saves lives, or at least extends them. There are records of barber surgeons writing their own manuals, complete with illustrations of where to cut and how to bind. Many of these texts are copied over generations, often with errors introduced by scribes who have never seen a surgery performed. Still, the barber surgeon is essential. In a world without antibiotics, without anesthetics, without organized hospitals outside monasteries, he is the frontline responder. The Church has mixed feelings about surgery. Some monasteries practice healing arts, particularly through prayer and herbal remedies, but the act of cutting into the body is seen as violating God's temple. Surgeons, therefore, occupy a morally ambiguous space, necessary, yet distrusted. The barber surgeon is no philosopher. He doesn't debate Galen or Hippocrates. He doesn't argue with the university men who speak Latin and wear long robes. He cuts, drains, binds, and burns. He is a creature of necessity. He may not cure, but he can stop the bleeding. And sometimes, that's enough. As the noon sun filters through the dirty windows of the shop, the barber surgeon finally sits for a meal, coarse bread, onions, and a bit of ale. He wipes his hands on his apron, stained with the evidence of his trade, and leans back with a sigh. A boy arrives with a scroll, a summons from a nobleman. It seems someone highborn has taken a nasty wound in a duel. The barber surgeon will need to travel. He packs his tools and nods to you to follow. Before leaving, he checks the pole outside, red from the fresh wash of bloodied bandages. It flutters gently, like a warning or a promise. And as you step into the warm afternoon light, a single thought remains. How much pain are we really willing to endure for the hope of healing? The journey to the manor is long, but not unpleasant. The air carries the scent of freshly harvested grain, and the road curves lazily between fields of barley and rye. The barber surgeon, riding atop a cart pulled by a drowsy mule, hums quietly to himself. He's done this many times before, traveling to tend to lords and knights who are far too important to be seen waiting in his humble shop. You're his assistant for the day, walking beside the cart and clutching the wrapped bundle of tools with both hands. They clink faintly with every step, a metallic reminder of what's to come. When you arrive at the manor, the air changes. Everything is cleaner, quieter, and more nervous. A servant meets you at the gate, clearly distressed. The young master has taken a blade to the thigh. There's been much bleeding. Inside the great hall, beneath the shadows of ancient tapestries and animal heads, lies the nobleman in question, barely more than a boy, his face pale and slick with sweat. His leg is wrapped hastily in cloth, and the stain has spread far beyond the bandage. He has not spoken in hours. The barber surgeon wastes no time. His hands, rough and sure, unwrap the wound. The cut is deep, and worse, festering. The scent of infection rises immediately. There are no illusions about what must be done. If the rot has reached the bone, he says softly, the leg must come off. Amputation in the 14th century is not a decision made lightly, but when infection takes root, especially among the nobility, time is of the essence. If the wound is allowed to fester, the rot will creep into the blood, and the young man will be dead by sundown. The physician, if consulted, would have insisted on prayers and poultices. But there is no time. The barber surgeon calls for the cautery iron to be heated, a long rod of iron with a flat, rounded tip, and begins preparing the bone saw. You fetch the leather straps used for restraint. An assistant must hold the shoulders. Another the arms. A third grips the opposite leg. You are given the head, told to hold it still, to cover his mouth if he screams. And he does. The saw begins its work, first through muscle, then sinew, then bone. The sound is unforgettable, somewhere between a grind and a shriek. Blood pours in thick rivulets. The surgeon works quickly, using a ligature to tie off the arteries, a practice becoming more common, though still not universal. The cautery iron is applied next, searing the wound shut with a hiss. The smell of burning flesh fills the room. A scream. Then silence. The nobleman survives. Whether he walks again is another matter. But today, he lives. The barber surgeon is thanked, not with gold, but with food and lodging. A noble family rarely pays in coin, but the prestige is its own reward. Word will spread, and more patients will come. Despite his grisly work, the barber surgeon is not respected in the way physicians are. In the eyes of many, he is a necessary laborer, no different than a butcher or a blacksmith. He doesn't write in Latin. He doesn't wear long robes or lecture at universities. But people come to him all the same. There's an old saying whispered in taverns. A barber surgeon may take your arm, but he'll save your life. Still, he knows his place. He's careful not to overstep when speaking with the nobility. He uses simple words, avoids discussing the higher aspects of medicine. He focuses on the body, not the soul. That night, you help him clean the tools. The saw is dulled and must be sharpened. The cautery iron is scrubbed with ashes and sand. Leeches are sorted into jars, the plump ones separated from the lean. You examine the instruments more closely now, their worn handles polished by years of use. The amputation knife, shaped like a wide crescent moon. The scoop, used for removing diseased tissue. The trepanning, shaped like a tiny auger, still stained at the tip. The needle, thick as a quill, threaded with gut or sinew. Each tool is brutally honest. No elegance. No ornamentation. Just function. The surgeon prefers it that way. There is no art in pain, he mutters, rinsing a bloodied bowl. Only speed. By morning, you're back on the road. The barber surgeon travels often, not out of choice, but necessity. Most towns can't support a full-time practitioner. He wanders between villages, earning his keep one boil, tooth, or blade at a time. On the way to the next town, he speaks of older times, of when surgeons were part of traveling armies, patching wounds on muddy battlefields, sawing limbs by torchlight. Some still do. You can always tell a battlefield surgeon, he says, by how fast he works. The best work in under 2 minutes. Anything longer, and the patient may die from the shock alone. But not all wounds come from swords. At the next village, a miller's daughter is brought to him with a festering burn from a bread oven. He slices away the dead skin with a curved knife, applies a paste of lard and barley flour, and binds it with linen. She doesn't cry. She just stares. He gives her father a list of herbs to find, yarrow, comfrey, and plantain. He explains how to make a salve. He may not be a licensed physician, but he knows what works. Sometimes, he says, the body heals if you simply stay out of its way. In rare cases, he performs what few dare, trepanning. In this village, an old woman is brought forth, muttering, twitching, plagued by what the locals believe is possession. The barber surgeon is less concerned with demons and More with the lump on her temple, the strange pattern of her fits, the head injury reported months ago. He considers the signs. Then he takes out the trepanning. The drill is placed carefully against her skull. There's no anesthetic. Just pressure, and patience. The tool spins slowly, and flakes of bone rise like dust. When the fragment is removed, the tension in her body shifts. The pressure is relieved. She breathes, deeper, slower. Will it cure her? Maybe. Maybe not. But sometimes, the mere act of trying is a kind of healing. As you help dress the wound, the barber surgeon says something quietly. The brain is a strange place. You can't see thoughts, only the cage that holds them. As the second day fades into evening, the surgeon sits by the fire, stitching a ripped cloak with the same steady hands he uses on flesh. He looks tired. Not from work, from memory. He speaks of apprentices who lost fingers to infection. Of patients who begged for the blade, and others who cursed him with their last breath. He speaks of nights where the tools were quiet, but the dreams were loud. And then he chuckles, a rare sound. Still better than being a baker. At least bread doesn't scream. You begin to understand, the barber surgeon doesn't do this for money or glory. He does it because someone must. Because when the body fails, when the skin splits, when the fever climbs, someone must act. It is a calling. Not a comfortable one. Not a clean one. But a necessary one. And as the fire crackles and the village sleeps, you find yourself staring at the trepanning, its round handle catching the firelight, and wonder quietly to yourself. What drives a man to cut open the human body with his bare hands, again and again? By the third morning, the road has become familiar. Dust clings to your boots, and the bundle of tools, heavier now with use, seems to carry a kind of invisible weight, not just steel, but memory. The barber surgeon walks with a limp today, the result of an old wound treated not by a colleague, but by his own hand. You arrive in a small village at the edge of a forest, where the people have already begun to gather around a wooden platform. A woman with swollen legs, a child with a twisted arm, an old man who hasn't passed water in days, all waiting silently, the way people wait for the rain or for death, with acceptance, not fear. Today will be long. And there will be no miracles. The first patient is a boy. Feverish. Eyes glassy. A large black boil has blossomed beneath his armpit. The barber surgeon doesn't flinch, he's seen this before. The plague, or something close to it, has come again. He lances the boil with a sharp scalpel, draining the black pus into a bowl that he immediately throws into a pit of ash and coals. He wipes the boy's skin with vinegar and wraps it in old, boiled linen. He says nothing to the mother. What is there to say? Perhaps the child will recover. Or perhaps by morning, he will not wake at all. You notice how the barber surgeon subtly cleans his tools more carefully afterward. The others are watching, but no one speaks of contagion. The superstition hangs thick in the air. Disease isn't understood, but it is deeply feared. He does not sleep that night. Neither do you. The next morning, a man hobbles toward the surgeon with a grotesque swelling beneath his tunic. A hernia, perhaps, or something worse. The surgeon examines it quietly, then reaches for his surgical scoop. He'll need a catheter, he murmurs to you. Fetch the metal one. It is a long, curved tube, rudimentary and unpleasant. The insertion is slow, guided by touch and intuition. The man groans, his face slick with sweat, but when the fluid finally drains, he weeps in relief. It is not a cure. But it is salvation, if only temporary. Later, a woman presents a broken wrist, a fracture from falling while drawing water. The barber surgeon gently manipulates the bones, his fingers memorizing the anatomy by touch. Alone. He uses thin splints of wood and cloth soaked in warm resin. There's no plaster, no modern cast. Only ingenuity and instinct. And it will probably heal crooked. But better crooked than useless, he says softly. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. That's not his role. In the afternoon, a monk from a nearby priory arrives with a question, not a wound. Is it true you drilled into a woman's skull? The question is laced with judgment. Trepanation is still a gray area. Some churchmen believe it allows demons to escape. Others see it as an abomination, a desecration of God's creation. The barber surgeon responds without looking up from his stitching. The pressure would have killed her. I released it. She breathes still. The monk leaves with a mixture of awe and unease. The surgeon knows the church keeps one eye on him. He walks a tightrope between healer and heretic. His patients trust him, but not because they understand him, they trust him because he's there when no one else is. You can pray over a fever, he says, but the boil still needs draining. That night, by the fire, you ask the question that has been building for days. How do you do it? Every day. The blood, the screams, the ones you couldn't save. He is quiet for a long time. Because it matters. He leans forward, hands clasped, staring into the flames. When a man loses his leg, and I take it, he curses me. Then, he sees another morning. And maybe the next. When a child's face burns, and I scrape it clean, they cry. Then, the fever breaks. I don't bring peace. I bring survival. That's the best I can do. You ask him if he's ever made a mistake. He laughs. A short, dry sound. Too many to count. There's a silence between you, a shared understanding. The weight of a profession that holds no guarantees, no glory, no forgiveness. Only the work. The next morning brings a patient too far gone. An old woman, skin jaundiced, breathing shallow, eyes distant. Her family has brought her not for healing, but for comfort. The barber surgeon sits beside her for over an hour. He holds her hand. He offers no potions, no knives. Just presence. When she passes, he closes her eyes, wipes her brow, and tells the family she felt no pain. Later, as you help bury her, you wonder if that was true. You don't ask. Not everything needs an answer. By the end of the week, the barber surgeon's hands are cracked and stained. He has pulled teeth, drained abscesses, stitched wounds, reset bones, amputated limbs, soothed fevers, and faced questions that have no answers. He will move on to another village tomorrow. The cart will roll forward. The pole will hang again outside a new shop, red and white, fluttering like a bloodstained promise. He has no books. No degree. No title beyond the one etched by time, barber surgeon. But he knows the body. He knows where it bends, where it breaks, where it bleeds. He knows that healing is rarely clean, and never easy. And he knows that even in the darkest corners of medicine, where pain and hope live side by side, someone must be willing to act. He is not a hero. He is not a butcher. He is something in between. And as you prepare to part ways, you look once more at his battered surgical roll, the saw, the scoop, the cautery iron, and you wonder. When history forgets his name, will anyone remember the lives he saved with those trembling, blood-stained hands? The morning begins with a smell. Not one, but many, a stew of powdered roots, rotting herbs, vinegar-soaked bandages, dried rose petals, and something faintly metallic. It clings to the air, to your skin, to your memory. You're standing in a 17th-century apothecary's shop, and nothing smells quite right. The building is narrow, timber-framed, and wedged between a fish stall and a coffin maker's. Wooden shelves line the walls from floor to ceiling, packed with glass jars, earthenware pots, bundles of dried plants hanging from rafters, and scrolls bound in leather. Every object is labeled in Latin or something close to it. You're here to observe, to learn, or perhaps simply to endure, a day in the life of an early modern apothecary. Not a physician, not a surgeon, but something in between, a compounder of remedies, a seller of cures, and, sometimes, a quiet inventor of poisons. The apothecary, a gaunt man in his 60s, wears spectacles so thick they magnify his eyes like polished marbles. His hands tremble slightly as he prepares his first recipe of the day. A woman has requested a plague water, just in case. Plague is never far, the apothecary mutters, grinding dried angelica root with a brass mortar and pestle. Even if the coughing stops, the fear never does. His hands move with practiced rhythm. To the crushed root, he adds white wine vinegar, clove, myrrh, and dried rosemary. The resulting sludge is spooned into a jar sealed with wax. This, he says, won't stop death. But it might delay it. That's all most people want. Much of what the apothecary makes is based on centuries of herbal tradition. Willow bark for fevers. Poppy syrup for pain. Garlic and wine for infections. Mercury ointment for syphilis, a cure far more dangerous than the disease itself. Sometimes he follows ancient recipes from Galen or Dioscorides. Other times, he invents as he goes, guided more by smell, color, and instinct than formal knowledge. You ask him how many of his remedies actually work. Some, he shrugs. Enough to keep them coming back. In the rear of the shop sits the cabinet of ingredients, a towering wooden structure filled with labeled drawers and jars. You read the names with growing discomfort. Mumia vera, powdered human mummy, imported from Egypt. Unicorn horn, likely narwhal tusk. Bezoar stone, a calcified mass from a goat's stomach, believed to neutralize poison. Powdered toad, dried and crushed, used in poultices for swelling. Cantharides, Spanish fly, ground beetle known to cause blisters and, occasionally, death. Some are useful. Some are dangerous. All are expensive. There are no safety labels. No dose instructions. The apothecary measures by feel, a pinch, a spoonful, a drop. He once made a tonic that caused a man's tongue to swell for a week. Another that cured a fever overnight. He remembers both with equal pride. I sell possibility, he says. Certainty is for the next life. By mid-morning, the line has formed. Customers file in with complaints of all kinds. A housemaid with a hacking cough is given a syrup of licorice root and honey. A merchant with kidney pain gets juniper and nettle tea. A nervous poet buys powdered deer antler to restore his vigor. But there are darker requests, too. A woman, trembling and weeping, asks for something to bring on her courses, a euphemism for miscarriage. The apothecary gives her a packet of pennyroyal and rue and says nothing more. Another man, whose neighbor's dog killed his chickens, requests a draught to thin the blood. He's not asking for medicine. The apothecary complies. Quietly. He never asks why. Only how much. This is not a profession of ethics. It is a profession of commerce. Later, in a small side room behind a curtain, the apothecary prepares something more experimental. He lights a small fire beneath a crucible, in which a powder begins to shimmer and bubble. He's attempting to extract antimony from a lump of ore, a toxic metal used in purging tonics. The process involves mercury, vinegar, and heat. "I lost 2 fingers to this once," he says cheerfully. The room stinks of sulfur. A bottle shatters from the heat. He doesn't flinch. He simply adjusts the angle of the flame and scribbles in a blackened notebook filled with spidery Latin. He's not just a compounder. He's a chemist, or at least what passes for one in this time, where alchemy and pharmacology share a bed and often fight for the pillow. Just before evening, 2 men in dark robes enter. Physicians. Real ones. Educated, licensed, and disdainful. They don't shop, they inspect. Apothecaries are technically beneath them, allowed only to compound what doctors prescribe. But in truth, most people can't afford physicians, and the apothecary's shop has become the people's clinic. The physicians ask to see his recipes, his scales, his permits. He shows them everything, politely but without deference. They find no violations, this time, and leave with sneers and muttered warnings. "One day they'll hang one of us," the apothecary mutters. Just to remind the rest. You wonder if he's serious. You decide not to ask. As night falls, the shop quiets. A candle flickers. The floor creaks with every step. A young man arrives at the door, barely standing. His skin is pale, and a bulge the size of an egg swells behind his ear. The apothecary doesn't even hesitate. "That's an abscess. It'll burst before morning." You assist as he lances it. The smell is unholy. Pus, blood, and bile spill into a copper bowl. The man collapses. The apothecary applies a plaster of crushed wormwood and honey, binds it tightly, and instructs him to drink nothing but chamomile tea. "If he lives," he says, "he'll stink for a week. If he dies, it won't matter." There is no sentimentality. Only process. As the apothecary extinguishes the final candle and locks the door, you realize you've witnessed something strange. Not medicine. Not magic. Something in between. A profession of strange powders and stranger ethics. A life spent mixing the hopeful with the harmful. A world where the cure and the curse are measured on the same spoon. And you leave the shop with a single, uncomfortable thought. How many lives have been saved, or ended, by the trembling hand of a man who never claimed to be a doctor at all? The second day begins with something unexpected: silence. Not the usual bustling quiet of early morning, but a kind of tense stillness. The apothecary's shutters are half-drawn. The sign, a faded wooden board with a painted mortar and pestle, hangs crooked. The door, usually cracked open to let in customers and the scent of camphor and spice, is closed. You find him at his workbench, grinding something dark and sticky in a porcelain mortar. He doesn't look up. "Laudanum," he says. The word carries weight. Laudanum, a tincture of opium dissolved in alcohol. A medicine. A vice. A salvation. A sentence. It cures pain, suppresses cough, stills infants. And if taken wrongly, he adds, pouring the thick liquid into a blue glass vial, puts the soul to sleep forever. Opium, like many substances in the apothecary's world, is two-faced. In small doses, it quiets agony. In large ones, it drowns the lungs and stills the heart. The same bottle that relieves a dying man's suffering can kill a child with a single sip. He labels the bottle carefully, 10 drops only. then places it on a high shelf, away from the rest. You ask how often someone overdoses. Not often, he says. Then, quietly, not often that I hear about. This is the truth behind the counter: every remedy carries risk. Every pinch of powder, every spoonful of syrup, is a gamble. Even simple pills are dangerous. The apothecary mixes clay, flour, honey, and powdered herbs into small pellets, some for constipation, others for insomnia or melancholy. He rolls them between his fingers like a baker with dough. But ingredients aren't standardized. The strength of a root varies by season. The potency of a bark by age. 2 pills from the same batch can yield wildly different results. It's not a science, he says, it's an educated guess. You begin to understand how terrifying this shop truly is. A woman arrives at mid-morning, cloaked and veiled, face pale beneath her bonnet. She doesn't speak. She passes a coin and a folded scrap of paper across the counter. The apothecary reads it, then nods. He retrieves a jar labeled belladonna, deadly nightshade. Its berries, when ingested, dilate the pupils, induce hallucinations, and, in sufficient quantity, cause cardiac arrest. For a husband, he murmurs after she leaves. Or a lover. Or both. You stare at him. He shrugs. I didn't ask. This, you learn, is the unspoken black trade of apothecaries. Behind the remedies and syrups lies another business, one never written down. Some apothecaries refuse to participate. Others, like this one, accept the reality. Sometimes the cure is a clean escape, he says, from pain, or marriage. You feel the temperature of the room change. Later, a priest arrives. His right hand is twisted, a birth defect, likely. He walks with a cane, eyes sharp with suspicion. He doesn't bless the shop. He inspects it. The church has long had an uneasy relationship with apothecaries. Too much like sorcery, they say. Too many unexplained results. Too much power in the hands of a man who answers to no bishop. The priest asks to see the apothecary's book of receipts, his ledger of formulas and customer names. The apothecary hands it over with a smile, knowing full well that not everything is recorded. After a few tense minutes, the priest closes the book and grunts. You walk a narrow line, sir. The apothecary bows slightly. And I balance well. They both know that no sin will be punished today, but the threat remains. One dead noble, the apothecary says after the priest leaves, and we swing like thieves. That afternoon, a visitor arrives who breaks the monotony, an old man in a scholar's cloak, face sunken, eyes wild. He claims to be an alchemist. Or perhaps once was. He brings with him a vial of pale yellow liquid and a broken crucible. He says he's this close to the philosopher's stone, the mythical substance that turns base metals into gold and grants eternal life. The apothecary doesn't laugh. He listens. Gold is not my concern, he says. But if you find eternal life, I'll take 2 doses. The old man leaves with a handful of crushed fennel and a promise to return with proof. He's been dying for 10 years, the apothecary tells you later. It keeps him busy. And you realize, sometimes the hope of a cure is its own medicine. That night, as you clean the counters and wipe down bottles, the apothecary winces. He pulls up his sleeve, a rash. Red, weeping. It crawls across his arm like creeping moss. Mercurial ointment, he says. Spilled last week. He treats it himself with vinegar and lead powder. You ask if he'll be all right. Perhaps. Or perhaps not. I sell death, after all. Why shouldn't I sample it? You don't know if he's joking. There is no doctor he will trust. No hospital he will visit. He will live or die by his own concoctions, as many apothecaries do. We taste what we sell, he murmurs. That's the old rule. And as he rubs crushed chamomile onto his blistered skin, you notice his eyes, bloodshot, shaking, perhaps from laudanum, perhaps from fatigue. He is not well. But he will continue. The day ends quietly. A final customer, a nursemaid, buys fennel tea and a salve for colic. A merchant drops off a request for stomach powder. A widow asks for a sleeping draught, then changes her mind. The apothecary locks the door and sits down with a sigh. He lights a single candle. Takes a sip from a dark bottle. Stares out the window. We make pills and powders, he says, but mostly we sell hope. He sets down the bottle and writes something in his journal. You peer over his shoulder. It's a new recipe. Tincture of valerian. Powdered lavender. Dried skullcap. A drop of laudanum. You leave him there, hunched, surrounded by jars of crushed flowers and bones, by poisons and perfumes and powders that might save or slay. And as you close the curtain behind you, you wonder. What becomes of a man who spends his life dancing on the edge of death, and starts to forget which side he belongs on? You return on the third day expecting the same routine, bitter smells, unmarked powders, patience with secrets. But something's different. The air is heavier. The shop is darker. The shutters are drawn completely, and the usual chatter from the street outside feels muffled, like you've entered a place out of time, a sealed tomb, still breathing. The apothecary is seated at the center table, hunched over a dissection tray. No customers today. No smiles. Just silence and something foul in the air. He died last night, the apothecary says, not looking up. You ask who? He taps the tray. A toad, preserved in alcohol. Swollen and bloated. Not a man. Just a friend. You're not sure he's joking anymore. Today's task, he explains, is inventory. Not of herbs or syrups, those can be restocked. But of bones. In the apothecary's world, bones are medicine. He opens a small chest and removes a human skull, sawn in half. The inside is scraped smooth. You try to look away. This, he says, is for epileptics. Powdered skull. We call it cranium humanum. Add strength to the brain. He picks up a second jar. Dried moss, scraped from graves. Usnea. Grows only on skulls. Used for nosebleeds. And for courage. Next, he unlocks a drawer and removes a brownish lump wrapped in linen. He unwraps it slowly. Mumia, he whispers. The ancient medicine, ground Egyptian mummy, imported at vast expense, sold. As a universal cure. For tumors, wounds, heartbreak. It smells like old spice and dust. They call it fraud now, he says, but once, it was hope. These relics, bones, dust, dried flesh, were once human beings. Now they're medicine. The apothecary treats them with quiet reverence. Everything can be used. In the right hands. You're assigned a simple task, grind dried mandrake root into powder. Mandrake, shaped like a human, steeped in superstition. Said to scream when pulled from the ground. Said to drive men mad. You laugh at the tales. The apothecary does not. Everything has a soul, he says. Even roots. You don't take the warning seriously. You grind too quickly, too carelessly. A cloud of fine powder rises into your face. You inhale. Within minutes, the room swims. The shelves melt. Your hands become someone else's. You hear distant crying, a woman. A child. The apothecary slaps you hard. You idiot. He forces vinegar under your nose, rubs garlic on your tongue, then holds your head over a basin. You cough, cry, spit. You've just danced with madness, he growls. A smaller dose, and you wouldn't be breathing. He doesn't speak to you for an hour. You learn an important truth: in this shop, there are no small mistakes. Later that evening, the apothecary pulls out a small black book, old, leather-bound, pages cracked. It is a family journal, passed down from father to son. Inside are recipes, drawings of rare plants, notes in cramped Latin. My grandfather began it in 1597, he says. He cured a bishop with burnt fig paste. Or so he claimed. He shows you a drawing of a woman's head, stitched at the mouth. Below it, a recipe for hysteria. Then a list of fatal dosages: arsenic, hemlock, mercury. You ask if his own son will inherit it. He shakes his head. No sons. No apprentices who stay. Everyone wants to be a doctor now, he adds. White coats. Clean hands. No blood under the nails. You realize this shop, this world, it. Disappearing. Not with a bang. Not with a trial. But with silence, like herbs left too long in the sun. Soon, he says, no one will remember the difference between Betony and Bistort. No one will know that ambergris is best collected from the belly of a dead whale. He smiles faintly. And no one will remember me. As the candle burns low, a knock sounds at the door. Late. Too late. The apothecary opens it. A boy stands there, clutching a bundle. His sister, he says. Fever. Won't stop shaking. The physician says she's dying. The apothecary doesn't hesitate. He grabs a jar, a thick green syrup. He pours it into a pewter spoon, wraps it in cloth, and gives it to the boy. 3 drops. No more. The boy runs. You look at him. Will it save her? He doesn't answer. He looks exhausted. It might. Or it might simply let her sleep. Which, in the end, is what most people want. He returns to the bench. Takes out his own vial, the sleep tonic. You ask if he plans to take it. He shrugs. Maybe not tonight. I have bones to clean. He grins. And someone has to poison the world responsibly. You both laugh. For the first time, it sounds real. You leave the shop one final time. The door shuts behind you with a soft click. You turn back and realize you might never enter again. The building will stand for years, perhaps. But the apothecary, this strange, brilliant, haunted man, will vanish. And with him, the ancient art of weighing powder by scent, of reading fevers by candlelight, of holding death in one hand and mercy in the other. Somewhere, a vial clinks. A root is crushed. A child is saved, or not. And the apothecary, alone in the dark, keeps brewing hope in silence. It is still dark when you arrive. The battlefield is silent, except for the wind and the low moan of someone nearby, wounded, forgotten, waiting. You follow the smell. Pungent, metallic. Blood, rot, sweat. You reach a striped canvas tent, pitched on a slope above the dead and dying. Inside, yellow candlelight flickers against stained cloth, buckets of dark liquid, and glinting iron tools. A man in a red leather apron stands with his sleeves rolled. He sharpens a bone saw, slow and steady, like a priest preparing for mass. "You're late," he says. "You've arrived at the barber surgeon's tent, not a place of healing, but of desperate arithmetic. How many lives can be saved, and how many limbs must go? Welcome to the worst job in medicine." The term barber surgeon sounds harmless. Even charming. It isn't. You quickly learn that the barber surgeon is a butcher with a prayer. He shaves beards, pulls teeth, sets bones, slices boils, drills skulls, and, when necessary, saws through living flesh. No anesthetic. No antiseptic. Just speed and luck. "You'll hold them down," he says. "You'll clean the blade. You'll learn when to look away." On your first day, 3 patients come in with broken legs. The surgeon amputates 2 of them. The third, a clean break, he splints with sticks and linen. You ask why the others had to lose theirs. "Too late," he says. "Bone was black. They'd be dead by morning." You watch the procedure. He ties a tourniquet, marks the spot, and begins to saw. The man screams, curses, faints. Blood sprays. You nearly vomit. Afterward, the limb is tossed into a bucket with others. The stump is cauterized with a hot iron. The smell is unforgettable. Later, you'll dream of it. The smell, the scream, the sound of saw on bone. And you've only just begun. The barber surgeon shows you his tools. Each has a purpose. Each has a story. Bone saw, not unlike a carpenter's, used for amputations. Cautery iron, heated until glowing red, used to seal wounds. Trepanning, a drill, used to relieve pressure from head injuries. Tenaculum, a hooked instrument for pulling arteries from the wound to tie them. Phleem, a blade for opening veins during bloodletting. Some tools are clean. Others are not. There is no time to sterilize. Boiling water is a luxury. Alcohol is scarce. Soap is for the officers. Speed is mercy, he tells you. Pain is the price of survival. You begin to assist. At first, you only hand him tools. Then you hold the patient's limbs. Then you help stitch. Then, one day, he hands you the saw. "Do it," he says. "Or walk away." You do it. You tremble. You sweat. But you finish. The man lives. And that night, you don't sleep. One morning, a soldier arrives with a leg wound crawling with maggots. You gag, but the barber surgeon smiles. Nature's surgeons. He explains, maggots only eat dead flesh. They clean wounds better than any blade. In fact, he sometimes adds them on purpose. You don't believe him, until you see the wound again 3 days later. It's pink, clean, healing. You'll see stranger things, he says. And you do. You see a man survive with half a face. Another who lives after trepanning. You see a boy recover from plague, only to die from a scratch that turns septic. You see men begging for death. And others who fight to live no matter what is taken from them. The battlefield is chaos. But the tent is a world of its own, brutal, focused, real. There is no politics here. No glory. Only pain and decisions. And the surgeon, with his blood-stained apron and eyes that never blink, is king of this domain. The surgeon's hands never stop. Even in sleep, they twitch, gripping invisible saws, tying phantom knots, digging into imagined flesh. You've seen him operate for 20 hours straight, fueled by wine and habit, until he collapsed in the corner and whispered, "Wake me if they're still breathing." You've learned to measure time by screams and blood. The wounded are dragged in by the dozen. Some limp, some crawl, some carried like sacks of meat. There is no privacy. No curtains. No silence. 3 men scream. 2 pass out. 1 dies before he reaches the table. Next, the surgeon yells. He doesn't weep for them anymore. He doesn't pray. He just works, fast and without hesitation. And he teaches you to do the same. Speed is everything. A slow surgeon is a dead surgeon. A slow surgeon loses patience. A slow surgeon dies in disgrace, drowning in blood and regret. You begin to learn the rhythm. Tourniquet. Cut through skin. Saw bone. Clamp artery. Cauterize. Stitch. Next. You time yourself. Your best amputation takes 3 minutes. The surgeon nods, barely impressed. His record? Under 60 seconds. But the man lost too much blood, he mutters. Died anyway. Still, you're learning. Your hands shake less. Your cuts are cleaner. You no longer flinch at screams. But the nightmares, they're getting worse. Behind the tent is a hill of human parts. Legs, arms, hands, feet, tossed like firewood, swarming with flies. Sometimes, dogs sneak in to gnaw the bones. Other times, the limbs are burned. But mostly, they just pile higher. The smell haunts everything. It's in your clothes, your skin, your soul. You once saw a crow peck an eyeball from a discarded head. The sound made you drop your breakfast and weep. The surgeon? He didn't look up. Waste of good wine, he said. Some say the surgeon was once a monk. Others say he killed a nobleman in a duel and was sentenced to this work instead of death. No one knows. No one asks. In the battlefield tent, past sins don't matter, only skill. And he is the best. Not everyone dies. Some are patched up and sent back to fight. You call them the lucky ones. But they return to the tent again, patched together with thread and hope. Each time, a little less whole. Some have stumps where legs used to be. Others wear bandages soaked in pus. One man has no nose. Another no jaw. You ask if there's ever real healing. Enough to die another day, says the surgeon. You learn to spot infection early. You smell it before you see it. The sickly sweet rot of gangrene. The creeping red lines of sepsis. The fever that kills faster than the blade. When you find it in time, you cut again. More flesh. More bone. More blood. Sometimes it works. Often it doesn't. But there's no shame in failure, only in hesitation. In a quiet moment, you find a folded paper near a dead soldier's belongings. It's a letter he was writing to his wife. Half finished. Smudged with blood. You don't know why, but you keep it. Later that night, by candlelight, you finish it yourself. You write. He died quickly. No pain. He was brave. He thought of you. A lie. But a kind one. You leave it with his body. And the next time, you do it again. You begin to write dozens of such letters. Each one a farewell the soldier never got to send. The surgeon notices. He doesn't stop you. But one night, he says. Don't let it soften your hands. The battle ends. Not with victory. Not with peace. Just silence. The kind of silence that hums in your ears after too many screams. The kind that feels like it's pressing on your skull, waiting to crack it open. You and the surgeon stand outside the blood-soaked tent. The pile of limbs behind you is steaming in the cold morning light. The firewood ran out days ago. Now, the surgeon burns bones. Crows circle overhead. Some don't even wait for death anymore. They peck at the dying as they groan. As they crawl. No one stops them. There are too many bodies. Not enough time. One by one, they come. Not soldiers. Survivors. They limp on crutches, stitched together with hope and luck. Eyes missing. Jaws wired shut. Fingers gone. Faces ruined. They come to say thank you. But they don't stay long. No one wants to linger in the place where they left pieces of themselves. One boy, no older than 16, comes with flowers. He places them on the table where he lost his leg. He doesn't speak. Just bows his head and leaves. The surgeon watches. He says nothing. But that night, for the first time, he scrubs the table twice. The surgeon coughs for a week. He's slower. Paler. The wine doesn't seem to help. He asks you to take over a small amputation. Then a larger one. Then an entire day's work. He begins to sit while you operate. He watches, correcting less. Mostly silent. Sometimes smiling. Until one day he doesn't come to the tent at all. You find him in his cot, still breathing. Just barely. Told you, to wake me, if they were still breathing, he whispers with a grin. You nod, your throat too tight to answer. He dies the next morning. There's no ceremony. Just blood on the floor, patients still arriving, and a pile of tools that must be boiled. You take his seat. You wipe the table. You sharpen the saw. And you keep going. Because there's no one else. And because the war doesn't end when the swords stop, it ends when the wounds do. You hear your voice shouting, next, just as he used to. You feel your hands moving with speed, precision, calm. You smell the rot and feel nothing. You don't cry. Not until much later. You survive the war. You leave the battlefield behind, but not the memories. Every scar, every scream, every letter, they come with you. You set up a barber shop in town. Nothing fancy. Shaves, teeth pulling, the occasional minor surgery. You hang his old saw on the wall. Some days, children come in for a trim and ask. What's that, mister? You smile softly and say. That's the blade that saved more lives than it took. You don't tell them the rest, you don't tell them about the pile of limbs. The maggots. The smell, the surgeon's cough. The wine, the letters. The silence. You just give them a good haircut and send them on their way. And sometimes, when you're alone, you pour a glass of wine. You raise it to the saw on the wall. And you whisper. Wake me, if they're still breathing.